Joshua Green is on the line with us. He's the author of a brand new book, Devil's Bargain. The subtitle, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. Joshua Green, also the website, Bloomberg.com/Businessweek. He writes, he's a senior national correspondent with Bloomberg Businessweek, previously the senior editor with The Atlantic and the Boston Globe, Washington Monthly, New Yorker, Esquire, Rolling Stone, and others. You can tweet him at Joshua Green, Green. And Joshua, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you.
Great to have you with us. So your book, the stories in your book and about your book are starting to leak out, like Donald Trump saying to Paul Manafort, "You think I'm a baby?" This came out of your book, right?
Yes.
So what is the essential message of Devil's Bargain? What did you learn when you were writing this book that you thought, holy cow, I got to tell this to people?
Yeah, no, the message absolutely, and everybody should know that if you want to understand what happened, how Trump won this election that nobody saw coming, certainly not me, you have to understand the relationship between Bannon and Trump, because for all, even after all the attention it's gotten, it is such a weird and strange backstory. And so I try and tell that story of how they came together, how they met, and then take you inside the campaign, inside the room, to show how it unfolded in Trump Tower on election night, because I think that is the best way to kind of get the full accounting of what really happened.
The Bannon is sometimes referred to as Svengali. Svengali was the bad guy in a 1898 novel, Trilby, by Georges du Maurier. And, he hypnotized this young woman and took advantage of her for years and years. Wouldn't a better analogy be Rasputin, who, was...
I think it would be, yeah. The Trump, Bannon is a guy whispering in Trump's ear, and I think a lot of people don't know that, Bannon isn't a guy who suddenly came on the scene in August 2016 when he took over the campaign. He has known Trump and been whispering in his ear about politics since 2010, when they first met at Trump Tower, when Bannon was this conservative filmmaker, a Breitbart news guy. And I don't think that Bannon thought that Trump was going to run for president then, but Bannon, being slightly crazed and a fun-loving kind of guy, thought it was a lark to go up to Trump Tower and talk to Trump. But the two of them really connected. They have a lot of similarities. They both went to military schools. They were both business guys, deal makers. They both had a background in the entertainment industry. And they both had a lot of anger and a chip on their shoulder. And I think that kind of forged the connection and made Trump willing to listen and to embrace Bannon's hard-right populist politics, especially the issue of immigration, which is what I think Bannon really brought to Trump.
So, and he brought immigration not in a what's best for the economy or what's best for the nation, but rather oh my God, the brown people are coming away, didn't he?
He brought a virulently anti-immigrant sentiment, both anti-undocumented immigrant and anti-legal immigrant. And I think Bannon, he'd produced a film in 2006 called Border Wars, where he was down on the U.S.-Mexico border. I think Bannon understood the visceral political power that the issue of illegal immigration has with a lot of conservatives, and I think he saw that viewpoint wasn't really being represented in the mainstream Republican establishment, and he coached Trump to go right after, to demonize, really, anybody with brown skin who was trying to get into the United States. And of course, Trump, from the very get-go, when he came down the elevator in Trump Tower, what was the first thing he said in his rambling election speech? He called Mexicans rapists and drug dealers. That was pure, uncut Steve Bannon.
So, what should we learn from this? I mean, to what extent has Trump completely absorbed this, and what does it mean for the future of our republic? What does it mean for the future of policy?
Well, I think for the future of policy under Trump, it's very disconcerting, because unlike a health care bill, Steve Bannon and Donald Trump can have, and already having, a profound effect on how our immigration laws are enforced. They can do that without having to pass legislation through Congress as they do to unwind the Affordable Care Act.
Right, and they're doing this right across the regulatory board, by the way. From the Interior Department to FDA.
Exactly. I don't think it's happening anywhere with more force than it is on immigration. Because Bannon told me during the transition, he said, "You watch. I'm going to employ the shock and awe strategy, and the very first thing we're going to do is go after immigration laws, immigration enforcement." He famously had the executive order banning immigrants from 7 Muslim-majority nations that was held up by the courts but caused these nationwide protests. Bannon told me that was intentional. I wanted people out there getting angry because I think that Americans really don't welcome immigrants, really don't want these people here. And if they see Donald Trump carrying out his promises to deport, to crack down, all these sorts of things, then they are going to understand that we in the Trump administration are carrying out our promises. And so these protests, far from being a bad thing, are really a good thing because people notice them and they see that Trump is doing what he says. That's kind of a chilling thought.
How is that different from Goebbels sitting down with Hitler and saying, we really need to go after the Jews, the gypsies, the communists, and the trade unionists?
Well, I think because Bannon isn't talking about exterminating anyone, it's just...
Well, I'm talking about in the early 30s when it was just, let's just demonize these people.
Well,
there's
definitely an element of demonization, and your analogy to the 1930s is an apt one because part of what I do in this book is to go really deep into the intellectual underpinnings of what it is that Bannon exactly believes and where this idea of nationalism comes from. And I asked him in the course of reporting from the book, I said, you claim, you say you're not an anti-Semite, you're not a white nationalist, and yet you name-check these fascist racial theorists, people like Julius Evola, who was Mussolini's chief racial theorist in the 1930s. There was a famous videotape of Bannon, and I think it was in 2014 at a Vatican conference, talking about Evola's ideas. I said, well, how is it that you're familiar with these people if you don't share their views? And he said, well, I'm a nationalist, and when I went looking for an intellectual underpinning, the most important nationalist thinkers were the guys in the 30s and 40s who were speaking to Mussolini and who were speaking to Hitler. And while Bannon claimed not to advocate or embrace their ugliest ideas, he said, that is who I look to for intellectual substance.
But that was like Julius Spengler. I mean, that was Blut und Erde, blood and earth, blood and soil was the catchphrase that was used in Germany. Type of nationalism. That was a racialized nationalism, as opposed to what I think is probably an acceptable nationalism of this is my country. It's a great country. I love it. I want it to be better. I mean, that's a whole different thing in a way.
Yeah, I think that's right. In Bannon's nationalism certainly goes beyond just a kind of a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, economic populism. He does strike those notes, although he hasn't done a lot to carry it out since he's been in the White House. But I think that Bannon understands it on a propaganda level as well. When I first met Bannon, I tell the story in the book. I traveled. He was doing a documentary film about Sarah Palin at the time, and he thought it was an homage to the late Soviet filmmaker from the 1920s, Sergei Eisenstein, one of the great propagandists. And I traveled out to Pella, Iowa for the debut of Bannon's film with Bannon and Andrew Breitbart, who was still alive at the time. And afterwards, I was interviewing Breitbart about Bannon because Bannon was still this kind of unknown figure who had just emerged on the scene. And Breitbart said to me, Steve Bannon is the Leni Riefenstahl of the Tea Party movement, citing the Nazi propagandist. And this is a label that Bannon embraced. I mean, he really does look to these people for inspiration, and a lot of his movies and even some of the language you can trace right back to them because I think Bannon believes that this is effective.
I wonder if that's why Kellyanne is referring to the force of will, or in fact, it was wasn't one of Trump's speeches recently about the power of will and
the power of will. I mean, all of Trump's speech you could listen to.
Triumph of the Will is Leni Riefenstahl's movie for people who don't know what we're talking about.
Yes, that's right. And in fact, one of Bannon's films, I can't remember, I think it's In the Face of Evil, a documentary he did on Ronald Reagan. Look at the opening scene in Riefenstahl's movie and look at the opening scene in Bannon's movie, it's the same thing. It's someone looking out an airplane window as it flies through the car. Intentional homage to a Nazi propagandist,
wow,
which Bannon thinks has real power. Power to motivate the kinds of people, these alt-right folks who really haven't been actively involved in electoral politics until Donald Trump.
Well, apparently it is real power. I mean, he's president now. So, we just, Joshua, we just have a minute till we're going to hit a hard break here. What should people expect or do or understand as a result of your research going forward?
I think you should understand that as crazy as these guys seem, and as hard a time as they're having on cable television, they understand something viscerally about how to manipulate the fears and anxieties of the American electorate. And really a large part of the story in Devil's Bargain is telling you how they did this from the inside, Bannon in particular. I would not underestimate their ability to continue to do this, even though it looks like right now like the administration is flatlining. They are real. There's real power there. Bannon and Trump are both willing to go further than they have, and I think that's really the thing to look for.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the Reichstag fire.
Yes.
I mean, I'm serious. I'm waiting for some horrible event, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a terrorist event, or maybe even like the Reichstag fire was apparently a false flag operation. I'm waiting for something that they can hang on, on the hook of, we're going to suspend civil rights and declare a state of emergency. Do you think I'm crazy, Joshua? Real quickly, we got about 10 seconds.
I think that you can't rule anything out with these guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Joshua Green, Senior National Correspondent for Bloomberg Businessweek. The new book, Devil's Bargain. It's brilliant. Check it out. You can tweet him at Joshua Green.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Joshua just hung up. Okay. Well, thank you, Joshua. Devil's Bargain is the book. Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the storming of the presidency.